The forest was so still it felt like sound itself had frozen. Snow clung to the redwoods, turning them into pillars of white silence. Each breath cracked the air like glass. Ethan Cross moved slowly, his boots crunching through a layer of untouched frost. The rifle on his shoulder wasn't for danger today. It was just routine. Habit. After the war, the forest was the only place that still made sense. It didn't ask questions. It just was. Beside him padded Scout, his English pointer, old, grey around the muzzle, but sharp as ever. Every movement precise. Every sound accounted for. The dog's nose twitched. His body stiffened. Ethan stopped. "What is it, boy?" Scout didn't bark. He just pointed, not at the usual rabbit trail, but toward a darker stretch of trees ahead. Something unseen, heavy in the air. Ethan followed the line of the dog's muzzle. At first, he thought it was just another redwood. Massive and ancient, bark split by centuries of storms. But then he saw it, a line running down the center. Too straight, too deliberate to be natural. He stepped closer. It wasn't a crack. It was a seam. His breath caught. He brushed away the moss. Underneath, smooth iron hinges, half swallowed by bark. And a handle. Cold. Metal. Human. A door. Set into the living flesh of a redwood. Ethan pulled his hand back as if burned. For a long moment, he just stared. The world around him seemed to pause. No birds, no wind, no heartbeat but his own. He'd seen strange things in deserts and cities, but nothing like this. A door in a tree. The kind of story told to children, not soldiers. Scout whined softly, not in fear but in urging. Ethan exhaled, his breath a slow white cloud. He should turn back. He knew that. But curiosity had always been his undoing. He gripped the handle. It was cold, unyielding. Then, a groan, deep and ancient, as if the tree itself protested. Snow slid from the branches above as the door creaked open. Inside, dim light. A flicker of orange. Not darkness. Not decay. The faint scent of cedar smoke and dried herbs. Ethan leaned closer, rifle low but ready. Shelves. Shapes. A table. A stove. It wasn't an animal's den. It was a home. Scout stepped forward first, tail low but steady. Ethan followed, his shadow stretching across the threshold. The forest behind him seemed to hold its breath. And as the door shut softly on its own, Ethan felt something shift, as though he'd just crossed from one world into another. The hunt was over, but something far older had just begun. Warmth. That was the first thing Ethan felt. Not heat from a furnace, but something softer, alive. The air smelled of cedar and smoke, of dried herbs and thyme. He scanned the room. Walls curved like ribs, polished smooth by decades of touch. Shelves carved straight into the living trunk. Glass jars lined neatly in rows, roots, berries, pressed leaves. A cast iron stove hummed quietly, its pipe vanishing up into the bark. Scout circled once, nose twitching, then Saturday. Calm. That was a good sign. No threat. No danger. Just presence. Then, from the far shadows, movement. A man stepped forward. Tall, though bent with age. Hair silver as frost. Beard tangled but clean. His eyes, pale, glacial blue, steady and sharp. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then the stranger broke the silence. "You found it," he said. His voice was low, rough, but not unkind. Ethan lowered his rifle slightly. Didn't mean to intrude. The man gave a small smile. Few ever mean to. Fewer stay long enough to listen. He moved to the stove, set a kettle over the coals. Every motion deliberate, as if he had performed it 1,000 times. "Sit," he said simply, nodding toward a rough stool. "You look like a man who's carried cold too long." Ethan hesitated, then Saturday. Scout lay down by his boots, tail thumping once before going still. The stranger poured water into 2 tin mugs. The steam smelled of pine needles and bark. He slid one across the table. "Tea," he said, "made from what still remembers the old rain." Ethan took a cautious sip. Bitter. Sharp. Grounding. Name's Ethan Cross. The old man nodded. Elias Thorne. He stared into his cup for a moment before speaking again. Used to be with the Forest Service. Ranger. Fire watcher. He gave a dry chuckle. Now I just watch. Ethan's gaze wandered. He noticed the carvings etched into the walls. Maps, rivers, weather marks. Like the rings of time itself. Each groove told a story. Each mark, a record. You live here alone. For a long time now. Elias traced a finger across the table's grain. I came after the fire. He didn't elaborate, but Ethan didn't need him to. There was a tone in the word, a weight that only those who'd lost everything could carry. It took my wife and son, Elias said finally, voice thin but steady. 30 years ago. Lightning storms set the hills ablaze. I was saving another man's land while my own burned. The room held its breath. Ethan lowered his gaze. He understood loss too well. Different fire, same wound. So you stayed, he murmured. I listened. Elias corrected. The forest doesn't forgive, but it remembers. I began to write what it told me. The rains, the rivers, the silences. The forest needs a witness. He stood, walked to a shelf, and pulled down a leather-bound journal. Pages filled with careful handwriting. Sketches of routes, tracks, maps of migration. A lifetime catalogued by hand. Ethan turned a page. You've been recording all this. Elias nodded. Every season. Every sound that shouldn't be. Men take pictures. I take truth. The kettle hissed softly. Outside, a branch groaned under the snow. For a while, neither man spoke. Scout's ears twitched. Ethan glanced toward the door. The forest was whispering again. But now he felt it differently. Alive, aware, waiting. Elias leaned back, his eyes narrowing with quiet purpose. You didn't find this place by chance, he said. It found you. Ethan met his gaze. He didn't argue. He couldn't. Something in the air said the old man was right. The storm had led him here. To a man who guarded a secret older than both of them. And though Ethan didn't know why yet, he felt the pull, the beginning of a purpose he thought he'd lost. Outside, the forest sighed. A sound that could have been wind. Or warning. The morning after came quiet and bright. Snow glittered like shattered glass, and the air was so still that even Scout's breathing seemed loud. Ethan woke to the scent of burning pine and the soft rattle of metal. Elias was already up, stirring the coals, steady hands moving with ritual grace. You sleep like a man who's been carrying too much, the old ranger said. Ethan smiled faintly. Long habit. Elias handed him a mug of strong coffee. Out here, habit's the only thing that keeps you alive. They sat in silence for a time. Ethan studied the wooden walls again, the lines and carvings. That told the forest story. Rainfall, seasons, growth, loss. Every inch of this place was memory. Then Scout stiffened. A low growl rumbled in his throat. Not fear, warning. Ethan was on his feet instantly. Elias didn't ask. He felt it too. The rhythm of the forest had changed. Outside, beneath the endless white, something mechanical broke the silence. A distant hum. Rhythmic. Artificial. Engines. Ethan grabbed his rifle and moved to the narrow slit Elias used as a lookout. Through the glass, the wilderness stretched out unbroken, until movement caught his eye. Far below, at the base of the valley, figures trudged through the snow. 5, maybe 6 men in orange helmets and thick coats. Behind them, the dark shape of a truck idling. Exhaust twisting into the sky. Chainsaws. Fuel cans. Spray paint for marking trunks. Elias's voice was a whisper, low and certain. They're not state crews. No insignia. He drew a breath that trembled with anger. They come after storms. Always do. Say the trees are weak, ready to fall. They'll carve through half the valley before anyone even files a report. Ethan kept his eyes on the men. He'd seen their kind before, not soldiers, not workers. Predators with permits forged by greed. They won't stop for talk, he said. No, Elias replied. And I'm too old to fight them. Ethan turned toward him. Then we make them want to leave. Elias blinked, surprised. What are you planning? Ethan's tone was calm, the same he'd used in darker places long ago. Fear works better than bullets. We make the forest their enemy. He knelt, unpacking what little he had: rope, wire, a hunting knife. Elias caught the spark in his eyes and nodded slowly. I know hidden paths, he said. Old ranger trails. Forgotten by everyone but the roots. They moved fast. Scout-led, silent as mist. Elias guided them along narrow ridges where snow hung heavy, ready to break loose with the right touch. The first roar of a chainsaw echoed through the trees. Ethan winced. The sound was violent, desecrating. He glanced at Elias. The old man's jaw was set tight. They reached the ridge. Ethan pointed. There. A cornice of snow, half frozen, resting on weak branches over the slope. He looped a rope around a rock, cut the line with a single swift pull. The forest held its breath. And then the mountain answered. A deep crack. A rumble. Snow tore free, rushing down like thunder. From below came shouts. Men scrambling, engines choking, chainsaws swallowed by white. Scout barked once, loud and sharp, the sound bouncing between trunks like a ghostly echo. Elias smiled grimly. To them, it'll sound like the woods fighting back. Ethan didn't smile. He knew fear would drive them off, for now. But men like that always returned. They stayed low, watching the intruders retreat. Orange helmets vanishing into the distance. Footprints already filling with new snow. Elias finally spoke. They'll tell their bosses it's unstable terrain. They'll stay away for a week, maybe 2. And after that? Ethan asked. The old ranger's eyes narrowed. Then we'll be ready again. As they walked back toward the hidden tree, Ethan looked up through the branches. At the light breaking through, cold but alive. He hadn't felt purpose like this in years. The forest had chosen him, just as Elias had said. And now, he wasn't leaving. The day after the ambush, the forest was calm again. Too calm. Snow covered every trace of what had happened. No prints, no chainsaw scars, no sign of men. Only silence, vast and waiting. Inside the redwood, the fire whispered softly. Scout slept near the stove, legs twitching in dream. Elias sat at the table, his eyes lost in the patterns of the wood. He looked older this morning, not weaker, just worn by the weight of memory. Ethan poured water into 2 tin mugs. You think they'll be back soon? Elias nodded. They always come back. Greed doesn't freeze. Ethan handed him a mug. Then we need to think bigger than scaring them off. He spoke the words slowly, measuring each one. I saw your journals. The maps, the samples, decades of records. That's not just survival. That's evidence. Elias's pale eyes lifted, sharp again. Evidence for who? For anyone who still believes the land matters. Ethan leaned forward. If this ever gets out, it could stop them, not for a week, but for good. The old man gave a dry, almost sad smile. You think the world cares? It's easier to ignore truth when it lives too far from a road. Maybe, Ethan said. But if you hide it forever, it dies with you. That hit home. Elias looked toward the shelves, at the hundreds of filled journals. Every one of them a heartbeat. A season. A witness. The weight of years pressed down on him. I kept it secret because the forest asked for silence, he said softly. But maybe silence isn't always protection. He stood slowly, his hand trembling just slightly as he reached for one of the journals. He opened it, revealing neat handwriting, sketches of riverbeds, rainfall patterns, notes about the songs of birds before storms. This is 30 years, he murmured. 30 years of listening. He closed the book and pressed it against his chest. But if I share it, I lose it. Once the world sees it, it becomes data, not devotion. Ethan met his gaze. Or it becomes a reason to protect what's left. They stood in silence for a long while. The kind of silence that decides things. Finally, Elias nodded once. Then we share it. Carefully. Not with corporations or agencies. With people who still remember how to care. Ethan smiled faintly. Then we start with me. The old man gave a dry laugh. You came here to hunt. I came here to escape, Ethan admitted. But the forest had other plans. Elias looked at him for a long time, really looked. And for the first time since they'd met, he smiled without sadness. Then maybe it chose well. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Elias showed Ethan the deepest alcoves of the archive. Drawers filled with dried seeds, glass jars of soil. Even old photographs faded to sepia. Ethan documented what he could, writing coordinates, organizing what could one day be carried out if needed. When dusk fell, Scout stirred, alert again. He moved to the door, tail low, ears pricked. Ethan glanced at Elias. Still restless, he said quietly. Like he knows something's coming. Elias stared into the fire. It's not over. The forest warned us once already. It always warns twice. The flames crackled. Outside, a gust of wind hissed through the bark, as if echoing the old man's words. Ethan placed another log on the fire and sat down. He looked at the door. That impossible door in the heart of a living tree. What had started as a hunt for quiet was turning into a war for something sacred. And this time, he wouldn't run from it. Morning came thin and grey, like breath against glass. Frost coated the window slits, and the fire in the stove had burned low. Scout stirred first, a low rumble deep in his chest. Ethan opened his eyes instantly. Instinct never dies. He rose, crossed to the door, and pressed his ear to the bark. Nothing but stillness. Yet something was different. The quiet had a pulse, like the forest was holding itself taut. Elias was already awake. He sat at the table, boots on, rifle beside him. A relic, but still loaded. He didn't look up when he spoke. They're back. Ethan's stomach tightened. How many? Elias motioned toward the slit in the bark. Ethan peered through. The snow in the clearing had been torn by boot prints, dozens. 2 trucks idled near the valley edge, spewing exhaust into the clean air. More men. Heavier machines. Ethan felt the old soldier rise inside him. Not fear. Focus. They won't stop this time, Elias said quietly. They'll clear everything they can before nightfall. Ethan turned to him. Then we don't let them. Elias's expression was unreadable. You plan to fight an army of saws. Not with bullets, Ethan said. With truth. And timing. He crossed the room to the shelves, pulling out journals. Maps, anything that could serve as proof. The forest's memory, all of it. If they couldn't stop the loggers by force, they'd expose them instead. We get this out, Ethan said. To the right people. Scientists, reporters, anyone who still listens. Elias hesitated, the years of secrecy weighing heavy. Then he gave a slow nod. All right. But if we fail, the forest burns twice, once in fire, once in silence. Ethan packed quickly. Cameras. GPS samples. A small flash drive of scan notes. Scout paced beside him, restless but ready. Before leaving, Ethan stopped at the table. Elias had placed something there. A spiral-shaped knot of wood, polished smooth. It was my wife's, Elias said softly. She called it a promise, that every ending hides a beginning. He pressed it into Ethan's palm. Keep it. If I can't finish this, you will. Ethan met his gaze. I'm not letting you stay behind. Elias smiled faintly. You'll need both hands to carry what's ahead. Mine are old, but they can still hold a line. Outside, the engines roared louder. The air trembled with the bite of metal teeth on bark. Scout growled, ears flat. Ethan looked once more at the hidden chamber. The journals, the tools, the quiet fire. Then he turned back to Elias. If we stand together. The old ranger's eyes shone with something fierce. Pride. Relief. He grabbed his staff and nodded. Then let's make them remember. They moved fast through the hidden passage, emerging into the white glare of day. Snowflakes fell like sparks from the sky. Below, men shouted over the buzz of saws. Trunks groaned, old giants swaying on the edge of ruin. Ethan raised a flare gun, fired into the air. A streak of red light burst above the tree line. A signal for the drones and cameras he'd contacted the night before. The message would reach the valley, then the town. The footage would spread like fire. The loggers froze, startled, turning toward the sound. Then the wind rose, a hard, rolling gust. That howled through the trees like a warning older than men. Branches cracked. Snow cascaded from the canopy, burying machines in white silence. Panic rippled through the clearing. Engines stalled. Voices broke. And above it all, a single bark: scouts. Sharp, commanding, alive. Ethan and Elias stood on the ridge, side by side. The men below looked small, fragile, out of place. For a moment, no one moved. Then one of the loggers shouted, "Let's get out of here." And just like that, the forest exhaled. When the noise faded, the two men stayed still. Only the creak of trees and the slow patter of melting snow remained. Elias leaned on his staff, breathing hard. His voice was hoarse but strong. "They'll tell stories about this storm," he said. "Say the mountain drove them out." Ethan smiled faintly. "Let them. The truth's already on its way." He held up the flash drive, the spiral of wood in his other hand. Two legacies, one built from memory, the other from choice. Elias's gaze softened. "You'll go, then." "I'll return," Ethan said. "But first I'll make sure the world sees." Scout nudged his knee, impatient to move. Ethan looked once more at the great redwood, its hidden heart still burning warm beneath the snow. The old man stood at its base, one hand on the bark, whispering something the forest seemed to understand. As Ethan and Scout disappeared into the trees, the first rays of sun cut through the mist, turning the snow to gold. And though the world would later call it coincidence, those who listened closely that morning swore they heard the forest breathe, a deep, grateful sigh. The keeper was no longer alone, and the promise of the redwood lived on.